If God created the universe, who then created God? This is one of the most challenging questions ever posed by humanity. Is there a valid answer, or is it an enigma that will forever remain unsolved? Let's delve into intriguing viewpoints from science, philosophy, and religion to see if we can uncover any clues about this question. This journey won't be straightforward. We'll walk through the doors of science with brilliant minds like Georges Lemaitre, who envisioned the expanding universe from a primordial explosion, and Stephen Hawking, who argued that the universe could have created itself without any external cause. We'll also wander through the philosophical maze with Baruch Spinoza, who claimed that God is not a distant entity, but the essence of everything around us, and John Lennox, who contended that there must be a first cause beyond everything, beyond. Then we'll examine our own souls through the lens of Carl Jung, who suggested that perhaps God is a part of our psyche, a reflection of our deepest desires. Don't forget to like this video if it's useful to you. And as you know, YouTube's algorithm tends to prioritize videos with more likes. So help me spread this video to more people. Much love to you. Science today helps us partly answer this question. Before this vast universe existed, there was nothing. Not space, not time, not light or sound. Only a tiny point, smaller than a speck of dust, contained the full potential of the universe. Then, in an instant so brief it can't be measured, the Big Bang happened. Space exploded, time began, matter and energy spread across the universe, forming stars, galaxies, and eventually the small blue planet where life began. The Big Bang isn't a miracle in the mystical sense, but a monumental event beyond comprehension, where a vast universe emerged from nothingness. It's called the Big Bang Theory, an enormous explosion that occurred about 13.8 billion years ago. But what caused it? If the Big Bang marked the beginning, then what sparked it? Who or what set off that explosion? I remember reading a children's science book as a child, and it said the Big Bang was like a balloon being inflated. But no one explained who held the pump, and how could such a chemical event, a burst of matter, result in such wonders? A vibrant universe, spiraling galaxies like living paintings, planets with mountains, oceans, and us, tiny beings who sit here, reflect on the distant past, and wonder about our origin. Many of us, perhaps you or even I one day, will say, there must be a creator. Only God could have created all of this. It's an answer that brings peace, a sense that this universe isn't random, not a meaningless series of events. I recall once speaking with my grandmother when I was young. She shared Bible stories with me about how God created the world in 7 days, and I believed it wholeheartedly. But as I grew older, I started reading science books and watching documentaries, and another question quietly appeared, following the light. If God created the universe, then who created God? This question is like a circle. You think you've found the answer, but it always takes you back to the beginning. I used to lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out if there was a way to break free from this circle. If God is the supreme creator, where did he come from? Has he always existed? Or is there someone, something behind him? It's like an endless game of tag. Every answer leads to another question, deeper and harder. Over thousands of years, humanity has sought to answer this question through two primary paths: religion and science. We've built magnificent temples with towering domes, churches with colorful stained glass windows and pagodas ringing with bells. We've written sacred texts like the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, texts full of inspiration, telling stories of gods, creators, and the meaning of life. We also have science, a different path, one not based on faith, but on observation, experimentation, and logic. We create giant telescopes to peer billions of light years away, launch spacecraft to explore distant planets, and solve complex equations to understand how the universe works. I remember the first time I saw a photo from the Hubble telescope, a spiral galaxy with its shimmering arms of light, like a cosmic dance. I thought, science is beautiful, but can it answer everything? Whether we follow the path of religion or science, the truth seems always just out of reach. Like a distant star we can see through a telescope, but can never touch with our bare hands. I once stood on a hill at night, looking down at the twinkling lights of the city, and wondered, will we ever truly understand? Or are we just touching the surface of a much larger mystery? But what if the answer doesn't lie in sacred books, temples, or laboratories, but is hidden within the very structure of the universe itself? Think about the phenomena science is uncovering. Mysterious black holes that swallow light, where space and time bend in ways we can't fathom. Dark matter, invisible yet holding galaxies together, unseen by anyone, or the very moment of the Big Bang, where everything began. Could these be clues leading us to the origin of all existence? I once watched a documentary on black holes, and the scientist in it said that we are looking into mysteries that could change the way we understand reality. If we look long enough, search deeply enough, could we touch the edge of the universe, or even go beyond that, to a place where the question of God is no longer about who created whom, but about the very nature of existence itself? Let's turn the clock back to the end of the 19th century, to a small town in Belgium, where the air still smelled of wheat fields and the sound of church bells rang every morning. Here, in 1894, a boy named Georges Lemaitre was born. Georges grew up in a devout Catholic family, where faith was the foundation of everything. From an early age, he carried two burning passions within him: a strong belief in God and an insatiable curiosity about the world around him. When he entered the University of Louvain, Georges didn't just want to read the Bible or pray like others in his community. He wanted to understand more deeply, not just about God as a concept, but about how he created this universe, each star, each planet. He wasn't the type to accept everything blindly. He was a person who always asked questions, like a child who never stopped asking why until he received a satisfactory answer, or at least an answer that made him think more deeply. He studied engineering, a field that required precision and logic, where everything had to be measured, calculated, and verified. But then, World War I broke out, and Georges joined the Belgian army. A young man, perhaps just over 20, entered the war with a gun on his shoulder and dreams in his heart. He witnessed horrors, bombs exploding, fields destroyed, friends falling. I once read a book about World War I, and the author described it as a nightmare that never ended. But for Lemaitre, those experiences didn't shake his faith. After the war, he returned to school. But this time, he chose a new path: mathematics and physics. These were the tools he believed could unlock the secrets of the universe, not through prayer, but through numbers and equations. The most remarkable thing about Georges Lemaitre is that he didn't stop at science. He also entered seminary to become a priest. a decision that made him a unique figure in history. He was like a bridge between two worlds, the ancient spiritual world of religion and the rapidly rising world of modern science. At the turn of the 20th century, science and religion didn't always harmonize. Centuries earlier, the Catholic Church had dominated European thought, and many scientists paid the price for challenging doctrine. Galileo was put under house arrest for saying the Earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around. Copernicus was criticized and even labeled a heretic for questioning the Earth as the center of the universe. By Lemaitre's time, many scientists viewed religion as an obstacle to progress, an outdated relic that needed to be set aside to make room for reason and experimentation. For them, combining science and theology wasn't just unusual, it was almost considered heretical. I once spoke with a friend who studied physics, and he said, "Religion is just fairy tales for adults. Science is the truth." I understood his point, but for Lemaitre, it wasn't that simple. He didn't care about the boundaries others set. He believed that science and faith were not enemies, but two different ways to approach the same truth. A great truth about the universe and our place in it. To Lemaitre, exploring the universe wasn't just about crunching numbers or studying graphs. It was an act of worship, a way of gazing into the mind of God, understanding how He designed this magnificent universe with each detail, each color. He wasn't trying to use science to prove God's existence, as some may believe. Instead, he sought to use science to feel the greatness of God, to stand before the vastness of the universe and exclaim, "This is the work of a mind far beyond us." In the 1920s, Lemaitre began doing something unexpected, something that would alter our perception of the universe forever. At that time, most scientists, including Albert Einstein, a genius known worldwide, believed the universe was static. They thought it had no beginning or end, simply existing forever in an unchanging state, like a picture on the wall that never fades. This concept was called the steady-state theory. It matched the rise of secular thought after the Enlightenment, when people started relying more on reason than faith. However, Lemaitre wasn't convinced by the simplicity of this idea. He took a deeper look at Einstein's general theory of relativity, the theory that gravity wasn't just a force between objects, but a distortion of space and time, caused by matter and energy. I remember trying to understand relativity in high school, and I have to admit, it left me confused. All that talk of curved space and stretched time sounded more like science fiction. But for Lemaitre, it wasn't fiction. It was the key to understanding the universe. He then realized something others missed. The universe may not be static. It could be expanding, like a balloon being blown up, growing bigger over time. If the universe is expanding, it must have been much smaller in the past. If you rewind time far enough, everything, space, time, matter, energy, would contract into a tiny, infinitely dense point. Lemaitre called this the day without yesterday, the moment everything began, a starting point for all existence. I recall the first time I heard this concept in a physics class. The teacher drew a small dot on the board and said, "This is where everything started. Every star, every planet, everyone in this room." I thought, really? How could something so small contain the entire universe? But for Lemaitre, it wasn't just a scientific concept. It had deep theological meaning. He saw in that moment the echo of the first line of the Bible. "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In 1927, he published a paper proposing that the universe was expanding from a primordial explosion, an event we would later call the Big Bang. But not everyone applauded. Many scientists at the time mocked him, claiming he was trying to sneak religion into science. Even Albert Einstein, whom Lemaitre deeply respected, didn't believe in this idea at first. He told Lemaitre, "Your calculations are right, but your physics is dreadful." The opposition was understandable. A universe with a beginning was a disturbing thought for many. It opened the door to questions about a creator, a subject many scientists of that time wanted to avoid entirely. For them, a static universe was a tidy picture. No need for an artist, no need for an explanation. But an expanding universe, one with a starting point, raised significant questions that science wasn't ready to address. But Lemaitre never gave up. He continued searching for evidence, creating mathematical models, and patiently waiting for the world to catch up to his vision. Then, in 1929, that moment came. American astronomer Edwin Hubble, a name you may recognize from textbooks or documentaries, made a discovery that shook the scientific world. He observed that galaxies were moving away from each other, like dots on an expanding balloon. This was the first experimental evidence for Lemaitre's theory, the evidence he had long awaited. Gradually, the scientific community began to listen to him. Those who had doubted began to reconsider. The term Big Bang was coined, originally as a sarcastic term from Fred Hoyle, a scientist who disliked the theory. Hoyle once remarked on the radio, "Big Bang? Sounds more like a joke than science." But the name stuck, and so did the theory. By the mid-20th century, the Big Bang had become the leading explanation for the origin of the universe, no longer just the idea of an eccentric priest, but a cornerstone of modern cosmology. For Lemaitre, this wasn't simply a scientific triumph to boast about or a way to make a name for himself in history. It was proof of his deep conviction that science and faith could together tell a larger story, the story of a universe with a beginning, created by a great intelligence. He never recklessly merged these two. Science was science, theology was theology, and he kept them separate, like two boxes on a shelf. But in his heart, the Big Bang was a way to feel the grandeur of the universe God had made, a way to stand before its vastness and quietly whisper, "Thank you, Lord." Fast forward a few decades to a laboratory in Cambridge, England, where the smell of old books and the clattering of early computers fills the air. Here, a young man named Stephen Hawking is preparing to defend his doctoral thesis. His topic? The origin of the universe, a question that Lemaitre had started exploring decades earlier. But while Lemaitre saw God in the Big Bang, Hawking took an entirely different path, one that led him far from faith and deep into the realm of pure reason. Hawking wasn't just a scientist, he was an icon, a man known to the world not only for his intellect, but also for his extraordinary willpower. His life was full of challenges most of us can't even fathom. At the age of 21, while studying at Cambridge, he was diagnosed with ALS, an illness that would slowly paralyze his body, taking away his muscles and his ability to move. The doctors said he only had a few more years to live, maybe 2 or 3 if he was lucky. I don't know about you, but if I were in his shoes, I might have collapsed after hearing such news. I once read a biography about Hawking, And the author said that when he received the diagnosis, he simply sat in his hospital room, staring out the window, thinking, "Is everything over?" But Hawking didn't just survive that prognosis, he transformed the way we perceive the universe. In those difficult early years, he was supported by his first wife, Jane Wilde, a devout Christian with strong faith in God. Jane was his light during dark times, when he had to battle his weakening body and the limitations imposed by the disease. She sat beside him, read to him, talked to him, and brought him hope when all seemed lost. Jane's faith was her strength, but as Hawking delved deeper into science, he became a committed atheist. For Hawking, the universe didn't need a creator. It could explain itself. I loved how he viewed the world. No miracles, no invisible hand from above, only cold and beautiful laws of physics, like a symphony without a conductor. He once said in an interview, "I don't need God to understand the universe. The equations are enough to explain everything." In the 1980s, by then a renowned scientist, Hawking introduced his most ambitious idea, the no-boundary model. To grasp this, we need to revisit Einstein's theory of relativity, the same theory Lemaitre used to build the Big Bang model. Einstein proposed that gravity isn't just a force pulling objects together. It's the distortion of space and time caused by matter and energy. I once watched a video that explained this by placing a bowling ball on a stretched fabric. The fabric curves, and small balls roll around it. That's how space is curved by planets and stars. But under extreme conditions, like near a black hole, where gravity is so strong that even light can't escape, or at the Big Bang, where everything began, normal physics no longer applies. Space and time become strange, like a crumpled painting. Hawking had already become famous for his work on black holes. He showed that they weren't completely black as people thought. They emit radiation, now known as Hawking radiation. In those difficult early years, he was supported by his first wife, Jane Wilde, a devout Christian with strong faith in God. Jane was his light during dark times, when he had to battle his weakening body and the limitations imposed by the disease. She sat beside him, read to him, talked to him, and brought him hope when all seemed lost. Jane's faith was her strength, but as Hawking delved deeper into science, he became a committed atheist. Imagine Earth for a moment to understand better. When you head north, you eventually reach the North Pole. But the North Pole isn't the edge of the Earth. It's not the point where you fall off the planet. It's simply the place where the concept of north no longer makes sense, where every direction turns into south. In Hawking's model, time is the same. If you reverse time, you don't hit a singularity, a rigid wall where everything starts. Instead, time becomes a form of curved geometry, merging with space like a ball without a beginning or an end. He calls this imaginary time, a mathematical concept where time works like a spatial dimension, just like length, width, or height. I must admit, when I first heard about this, my head spun like I had just stepped out of a whirlpool. But Hawking explains it simply: the universe has no beginning or end. It simply exists. This idea is wild, yet beautiful, like a poem written in mathematics. In his famous book, A Brief History of Time, he explains that thanks to quantum laws, the strange rules governing the world of tiny particles, the universe can create itself from nothing. For Hawking, this eliminates the need for a creator. If there is no beginning, if time has no boundary, then there's no need for anyone to flip the switch. to start the universe. He writes, "Because of laws like gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing." I remember reading this for the first time in the school library. I paused, looked out the window and thought, is it really that simple? Just one law, and everything naturally comes into being? For Hawking, this is a self-sustaining vision, a universe entirely governed by physical laws, natural and inevitable, like a perfectly working machine that doesn't need anyone to start it. But not everyone agrees with this view. Many people, perhaps even you or even me one day, will ask, okay, but where do these laws come from? Who or what set them in place? I once debated this with a friend on a rainy evening. He said, without God, everything is just random, and randomness can't create a beautiful and orderly universe like this. I replied, but if the laws are strong enough to create everything, why do we need God? The debate went on for hours, and we never reached a conclusion. If the universe is like a machine, as Hawking describes, then even the most complex machine needs a designer to set the rules, right? I once looked at my grandfather's old clock, 100 tiny gears, turning in harmony to keep accurate time. It didn't just appear from nothing. A watchmaker made it. So, why should the universe be different? Hawking may have pushed the question back one step, from who created the universe to who created the laws, but he hasn't eliminated it entirely. In 2010, when Hawking published his book, The Grand Design, with the bold claim that the universe created itself, one person stood up to counter it: John Lennox, a mathematician and philosopher at Oxford University. Lennox was born in Northern Ireland in 1943, in a land marked by religious and political divisions. But his family was different. His parents were devout Christians, but they didn't force him to believe blindly. Instead, they encouraged him to read, question, and debate. About science, philosophy, and faith, Lennox's father, a businessman, always ensured he had enough material to nourish his curiosity. He once shared in a lecture that his father often said, "Don't be afraid to ask why. Just make sure you seek the answer with your own mind." This unique blend shaped Lennox's thinking. Someone who was both skilled in mathematics and deeply believed in God as a real entity, not just an abstract idea. When he read Hawking's arguments in The Grand Design, Lennox saw a major flaw, not in the math or physics, but in logic. Hawking said that gravity and physical laws could make the universe create itself from nothing. But Lennox immediately asked, what is nothing? If there was truly nothing before the universe, no space, no time, no matter, then how could laws like gravity exist? For him, this was a fundamental logical contradiction. Laws don't exist on their own. They need matter, space, and time to operate. Without the universe, gravity would mean nothing, like a piece of music without instruments to play it. I once thought about this while sitting, watching a plane fly across the sky on a summer afternoon. The principles of aerodynamics explain why it flies, the way air flows over the wings, the pressure keeping it aloft. But those principles didn't create the plane. It needed an engineer to design it, a factory to assemble it. Lennox makes a similar point. Physical laws can describe the universe, but they can't create it from nothing. He argued that using laws to explain the universe's existence is like saying cooking recipes can make a cake on their own. You still need ingredients and a cook. He also critiqued Hawking's no-boundary model in more detail. While this model avoids the singularity, the tiny point Lemaitre had envisioned, it still relies on an existing quantum field with certain laws. I tried to visualize a quantum field when I read about it in a popular science book. It's like an invisible net vibrating throughout the universe with tiny particles dancing according to mysterious rules. But for Lennox, the question remains, where did that quantum field come from? Where do the laws governing it originate? For him, every natural explanation leads to an infinite regress. Each answer gives rise to a new question, like a domino chain that never stops. To clarify, Lennox shares a story from German folklore that I found both humorous and profound, the story of Baron Munchausen. He was a fictional character famous for outrageous tales, so unbelievable that no one could believe them. One day, the Baron found himself trapped in a swamp, with the mud rising up to his knees, then his waist, and finally his neck. No way out, no help. He panicked, but then, with a sudden idea, he grabbed his own hair and pulling so hard that he lifted himself and his horse out of the swamp onto dry land. I laughed out loud the first time I heard this. It was funny, but utterly illogical. You can't lift yourself by your own hair without a point of support, no external force, nowhere to grab. Lennox says the self-creating universe is the same. It would need to exist first in order to create itself, a logical absurdity like an unsolvable riddle. I once shared this story with a friend, and he said, "It's funny, but it makes me think, if the universe can't create itself, what did create it?" For Lennox, the existence of the universe requires an external cause, an uncaused cause, something beyond space and time, beyond the rules we understand. He calls that God, not a product of the universe, but the origin of everything from distant stars to every speck of dust beneath our feet. I once sat on a quiet evening looking up at the stars and thought, if there is a first cause, it must be something truly special, not like anything we can imagine. But then, the old question returned, like an uninvited guest. If God is the cause, who created him? Lennox has an answer for this, a response he believes is the only escape from the infinite loop. He says that God is the necessary being, an ancient philosophical concept, meaning that he exists independently, needing no cause, not depending on anything else. Everything in the universe, from the tree in the garden to the star in the sky, requires a cause. The tree needs soil, water, light. The star needs matter and gravity. But with God, Lennox says, he is the stopping point. He doesn't need anyone to create him, because he is the foundation of all existence. I must admit, when I first heard this, I wasn't fully convinced. It seemed like an easy out, like when you're playing a puzzle game with friends, and at the last moment, you say, well, here's the answer. No more questions. I once asked a Christian friend, if God doesn't need a cause, why does the universe? He laughed and said, because the universe had a beginning, God didn't. But for me, the question still lingered, a small gap in my mind that I couldn't fill. Now let's turn to a completely different perspective, from philosopher Baruch Spinoza, whom I consider one of the most unique minds in history. Spinoza was born in 1632 in Amsterdam, Netherlands, into a Jewish family in a tight-knit community where religious tradition was everything. I imagine he grew up among cobblestone streets, the sound of church bells echoing, and the smell of fresh bread baking from the Jewish bakeries nearby. But Spinoza wasn't one to follow the conventional path. He was dissatisfied with what was taught in the synagogue. In 1656, a 24-year-old young man stood before the council of elders, silently listening to the harsh judgment that would change his life. Herem, an absolute excommunication. From that moment on, his family, friends, and community turned their backs on him. No one could speak to him. No one could help him. Every door shut, every connection severed. Not a prison, not chains, but a punishment in a different form. A man erased from the very world he once belonged to, simply for daring to think differently, for daring to question. After that, Spinoza lived in solitude, moving away from Amsterdam to find a peaceful place. He made a living grinding lenses, a meticulous job requiring patience and skilled hands. I picture him sitting in a small workshop, the light filtering through the window onto the pieces of glass he was polishing, while his mind wandered far beyond the boundaries others had set. Though he lived simply, he never stopped thinking, writing, and exchanging letters with intellectuals across Europe. Spinoza did not believe in a personal God sitting on a throne, looking down on us from heaven. For most people of his time, and even now, God is a separate being, a creator who made the universe and then stands aside, intervening when necessary through miracles or decrees. But for Spinoza, that wasn't the case. To him, God was not some distant someone. God was the universe itself, the essence of everything around us. I admire how he thought. It's simple yet profound, like a beam of light piercing through the fog. Everything, from the stars twinkling in the sky, the planets spinning in space, to physical laws like gravity or electromagnetism, was an expression of a single divine essence. There is no distinction between the creator and creation. All is one, fused into a single reality. Gravity isn't something added to the universe by an invisible hand. It is part of the divine intelligence that holds everything together, like an invisible string connecting the stars and planets. Time, space, matter, they are all ways in which God expresses himself. I once sat under an old tree in a park near my home, watching the leaves fall with the wind, and wondered, could Spinoza be right? Is everything from this tree to this breeze to myself a part of a larger reality? For Spinoza, exploring the universe through science isn't separate from spirituality. It is spirituality. When you measure a planet's orbit, study the behavior of light, or learn how tiny particles interact, you are understanding God. This idea is beautiful, but also highly controversial. It removes the need for an intervening God. No miracles, no hand from above, changing the course of events. For Spinoza, everything in the universe, from the birth of a star to the death of a flower, is part of a natural order, an order that is the embodiment of God. As a result, he was called an atheist, though he never denied the existence of God. I once read a book about Spinoza, and the author wrote that he was seen as a threat, not just to Judaism, but to Christianity and the ruling powers of his time. His works, like Ethics and Tractatus Theologico-Politicus, were banned in many places. His name became synonymous with heresy, with danger. But Spinoza didn't care about those criticisms. He lived quietly, writing in his small room, exchanging letters with intellectuals across Europe, and leaving behind a legacy that changed the way we think about divinity. Hundreds of years later, Albert Einstein, one of the greatest scientists of all time, agreed with Spinoza. In a letter from 1929, Einstein wrote, "I believe in the God of Spinoza. who reveals himself in the harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and actions of human beings. For Einstein, God wasn't a father in heaven who blesses or punishes. He was the order of the universe, the beautiful laws that he spent his life exploring, from the theory of relativity to equations that describe space and time. I remember reading another quote from Einstein. "The universe seems too perfect to be just a random accident. I sense a profound harmony in how it operates." Was he agreeing with Spinoza? I think so. Einstein was once asked if he believed in God, and he gave an ambiguous answer. "I believe in something greater than us, but not the kind of God the churches talk about." For him, God was the wonder of nature, without form, without personal will, just an all-encompassing reality. Carl Sagan, the scientist famous for the Cosmos documentary series, was also influenced by this idea. Sagan didn't talk much about Spinoza, but you can see his influence in the way he spoke about the universe. He once said a line that I love: "We are made of star stuff. We are the way the universe self-recognizes." I remember hearing this for the first time on a quiet evening, watching Cosmos on TV. It gave me chills, not because of fear, but because of awe. Star stuff. That phrase is so beautiful. It reminds me that every element in our bodies, carbon in our bones, oxygen in our breath, nitrogen in our blood, was forged in the nuclear furnaces of stars that died billions of years ago. We don't just live in the universe, we are a part of it, connected to distant galaxies by invisible threads of matter and energy. For Sagan, God wasn't an entity to be worshipped. He was the connection between us and the vast universe, an idea not far from Spinoza's vision. Sagan took it even further by saying that through human consciousness, the universe begins to understand itself. I once thought about this while walking through a field at night, gazing at the stars and asking, am I the eyes of the universe? Is my presence here, thinking and feeling, the universe looking back at itself? It's a thought that makes you feel both insignificant and significant. Insignificant in the vastness of space, but significant because you are a part of that grand story. Now, let's step into a different world, the world of the human mind. With Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who believed God is not out there among the stars, but within us, in the deepest corners of our souls. Jung grew up in a religious family in Switzerland, where his grandfather was a pastor, and his father also pursued theology. But Jung was not satisfied with the simple answers provided by the church. He started his career as a psychiatrist, working with patients suffering from mental disturbances, those who were haunted by strange dreams, invisible fears. But over time, he didn't just focus on treating symptoms. He went deeper, exploring ancient myths, medieval alchemy, and his own dreams, not to abandon science, but to expand it beyond what could be measured with machines or equations. I once read a book about Jung, and the author referred to him as the explorer of the soul, a title that suits him perfectly. Jung believed that the gods we create, whether in religion, in ancient stories, or in our dreams, are archetypes. These are profound symbols from the collective unconscious, a shared treasure of humanity, passed down through generations. Imagine your mind as an immense, deep ocean. On the surface are daily thoughts, the tasks you need to do, the dinner you're going to cook, or the movie you plan to watch this weekend. But deep beneath, in the dark and mysterious waters, lie ancient images, The mother, with her warm embrace, the hero battling darkness, the villain hiding in the shadows, and the divine, the image of God, of divinity, of a power far beyond us. For Jung, when someone dreams of a god or kneels to pray in a temple, they are not necessarily connecting with an external being, a bearded old man in the clouds, or a thunder god atop Mount Olympus. Instead, they are touching an inner longing for meaning, for wholeness. One story Jung told was about a patient of his. This woman came to him, troubled by a recurring dream. In the dream, a godlike figure, glowing with light, came to her and gave her a golden cup. She woke up in a cold sweat, frightened, unsure of its meaning. Jung sat with her, listened, and then asked, "How did the cup make you feel?" She said it made her feel both afraid and longing, like it represented something important that she couldn't quite reach. For Jung, the golden cup wasn't just a dream object. It was an archetype. It could represent transcendence, the desire to reach something higher, or deep healing within her soul. Jung didn't deny that God is real. Don't misunderstand him. He wasn't an atheist trying to dismiss religion. Instead, he said that the question, "Is God real?" is not as important as what God represents in our minds. For him, the sacred is a symbol of wholeness, how we strive to reconcile the broken pieces of our souls, the light and dark, the joy and fear. When you pray, meditate, or recount stories about gods, you're seeking order in the chaos of life, a meaningful narrative to hold on to when everything seems uncertain. Think about the stories you love, the movies or books you can't stop watching or reading. I'm a big fan of The Lord of the Rings. In it, Frodo, a small hobbit, embarks on a journey with a powerful ring, facing unimaginable challenges, fighting darkness both outside and within himself, and eventually becoming someone different, stronger, and wiser. For Jung, this wasn't just an entertaining tale, it was an archetype, the hero's journey repeated across mythologies around the world, from the Greek Odysseus to the legendary warriors of Africa. When we watch these stories, we don't just see the characters on the screen or in the book. We see ourselves. We are also searching for meaning in the midst of chaotic days, confronting our own fears, perhaps not a fire-breathing dragon, but concerns about work, family, or the future, and hoping to grow through those challenges. I once rewatched The Lord of the Rings on a sleepless night, and when Frodo finally threw the ring into the volcano, I thought, I want to overcome my darkness like that. Even the skeptical scientists, those who scoff at the idea of God or the divine, are not exempt from this. Jung would say that their quest for knowledge, the passion to explore the universe, to decipher the laws of physics, is also an archetype. It doesn't have to be named God. It just needs to be the longing for something greater, a truth that transcends what we see every day. Jung left behind a special work called the Red Book, a large book he wrote and illustrated by hand, chronicling his dreams, visions, and reflections over many years. In it, he wrestled with these images, not as external entities, but as parts of his own mind, pieces of himself that he was trying to understand. I like to think of the Red Book as a personal journey, an effort to understand oneself through the deepest symbols. Once I tried keeping a journal of my dreams, but after a few days, I gave up because I was lazy. But when I read about Jung, I thought, maybe we all have a book like that inside us, not on paper, but in our thoughts. In the quiet moments when we ask ourselves who we are and why we're here. So where do we end up in this long story? After walking through the ideas of Lemaitre, Hawking, Lennox, Spinoza, and Jung, Georges Lemaitre saw God in the moment of the Big Bang, a universe with a beginning, a divine creation written in mathematics and faith. Stephen Hawking saw a self-creating universe, needing no creator, relying solely on cold yet miraculous physical laws, like a machine running on its own with no one to start it. John Lennox argued that there must be a first cause, an entity beyond everything we know, a stopping point for the endless chain of questions, and he called that God. Baruch Spinoza said that God doesn't stand outside the universe looking down on us. He is the universe, the essence of all existence, from the farthest stars to every breath we take, all blending into one reality. And Carl Jung whispers that maybe God isn't out there among the galaxies or on a throne, but inside us, a symbol of our deepest yearning, a reflection of ourselves as we search for meaning amid the chaos of life. Who is right among them? I'm not sure there's one answer, and perhaps that's what makes this question so beautiful. There are nights when I lie under the starry sky, gazing at those distant bright dots, and I feel like Lemaitre, that there must be some great hand behind it all, a great intelligence that painted this picture. But there are also days when I read Hawking in the library, surrounded by thick books, and think, maybe the universe really does operate on its own, like a miracle that needs no explanation, a simple yet astonishing idea. Then, when I read Spinoza through philosophical texts, I wonder if everything truly connects as one, from the tiniest speck of dust under my feet to the most distant galaxy the telescope can see. I once sat beside a small stream on a quiet afternoon, listening to the water flowing over the rocks, and thought, if Spinoza is right, then this stream, that tree, and I, we are all part of the same reality, the same force. And when I read Jung on rainy days, I look inside myself, telling myself, maybe everything I'm searching for, God, meaning truth, is right here within me, waiting to be discovered. The question, who created God, is not meant to have a final answer. At least, I don't think so, after all we've explored. This question serves to remind us of the wonder of existence, of the fact that we are here, in a universe so vast it cannot be measured, with mysteries that we may never fully solve. I once walked along a beach early in the morning, as the sun was rising on the horizon, the golden light reflecting on the water. I heard the steady rhythm of the waves, felt the soft sand beneath my feet, and thought, no matter what the answer is, just being here, feeling this, is already a miracle. To me, God is not a puzzle to be solved by logic or mathematics. He is a feeling, a connection between me and the world, a wonder before the stars, before life, before the fact that I can sit here and tell you this story. And perhaps, as the ancient philosophers from India that I read in college once suggested, God is the immortal force within each of us, the soul we need only recognize within ourselves. I remember sitting in meditation during a yoga class a few years ago, trying to listen to myself between the steady breaths. In a brief moment, I suddenly thought, if I'm not this body, not this mind with all its daily concerns, but something deeper, a soul, a spark, could this be God? We pray in front of statues in temples, crosses in churches, or idols in ancient rituals. But perhaps, as the philosophers and thinkers we've met today suggest, as long as we don't look inward, as long as we don't realize that the divine power is not only out there, but also within us, we will continue to wander in endless circles, searching but never finding. The question, who created God, is not meant to have a final answer. At least, I don't think so, after all we've explored. This question serves to remind us of the wonder of existence, of the fact that we are here, in a universe so vast it cannot be measured, with mysteries that we may never fully solve. Please leave a comment below. I look forward to reading your thoughts, whether it's a short sentence or a long essay. Every perspective is a piece of the larger picture we're all drawing together. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episodes of The Reality Space, where we'll continue to explore big questions, deep mysteries, and thought-provoking stories. See you soon. And I wish you a truly wonderful, inspiring, and magical day.